From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Alexis, codenamed Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It's the top of the week, which means it is time for strange news. Scientists in Antarctica, true story, are developing their own accent because of the isolation. Yeah, did you guys see that?
I'm excited to talk about it, though. That's makes sense from a sociological standpoint, but I can't wait to hear more.
Oh, yeah. Right now, it's just a mention because we have a lot to get to, and I think we need to hear the accent develop more. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can have an Antarctican on the show in the future for an episode or an interview. We are also going to learn about Yakuza nuke smuggling. If you guys did you read the news about that?
Surprise me.
Okay, so
no, is this just a mention too, or is this your main guy?
It's just a mention too.
Okay. Wow, jeez, the Yakuza, they got their hands in all kinds of nefarious pies, don't they?
Yeah, so the story for the Yakuza smuggling broke pretty recently, earlier in February, as we're recording. A guy named Takashi Ebisawa was already facing drug trafficking charges, and then he got caught selling to investigators, attempting to sell uranium and plutonium, or the raw ore for it, that could make nuclear weapons. And the funny part about this is, if humor does exist in this, is that this guy's not a nuclear scientist. He's no AQ Khan. The stuff he was selling is not what you would think of as uranium. It's like the raw substance you need to make these things, sourced from Myanmar or Burma, as some call it. And most likely, he was just hoping to scam a government out of some cash, because it's stuff Iran already has. So this story is being widely reported in sort of a panicky way. And I don't think, I don't know, I don't think that this is a panic moment, but nuclear smuggling is going to be a thing, and it's going to happen more and more often now.
I mean, it is the kind of thing you see in like films, but usually it's sort of like exaggerated versions of maybe what's actually happening in the real world, where there's like, brokers for that kind of stuff, or selling the supplies you'd need to make dirty bombs and the like. But not to say that doesn't actually happen already.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you mentioned brokers, Noel, because that takes us to one of the main things I wanted to talk about today. We are fortunate to be joined with one of Doc Holliday's alter egos, Wendy's Burger Broker, because Wendy's got in trouble recently. The Mixtape legend, Wendy's, that also has a fast food joint or two.
They're one of those like kind of fire social media manager brands where they like get in like beefs with other brands on X or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah. Check out the Wendy's Mixtape. Rest in Grease is a stem to stern banger. The Clown is about a certain rival, you can imagine. It turns out that despite being so fluent in the language of social media, Wendy's had a bit of a misstep recently, because on their most recent earnings call, they announced, or the CEO announced, that they were going to use dynamic pricing. I want to give a big shout out to our friends over at AP News, who were some of the first to the post with this story. But we know what dynamic pricing is. We use
the Ticketmaster thing, right?
Yeah, and Uber and Lyft all the time. Sure. You see that, right?
I think we accept it with Uber and Lyft. The Ticketmaster thing caused a big old stink, though, because it seemed to be not victim. That's maybe the wrong word. We're buying tickets here, not getting aid. But it did seem to be hurting people in terms of their ability to get the tickets they wanted at a reasonable price. Because I think it was something like Bruce Springsteen, who's Mr. America and like fairness and working man or whatever. Those tickets were going for like thousands of dollars because of the nature of that dynamic pricing.
And we see this also occur in a related way with Airbnb rentals. Like, a lot of times people will This happens during eclipses, weirdly enough. People will try to find the best spot to watch an eclipse. They'll get an Airbnb there. And then when the owners of the Airbnb realize that they can make more money renting it out on the eclipse, then they can cancel the appointment and change things with a different price. For many people, this is free market. This is business 101, supply and demand. And that seemed to be what CEO Kirk Tanner was thinking when he said, quote, during this conference call, beginning as early as 2025, we will begin testing more enhanced features like dynamic pricing and day part offerings, along with AI-enabled menu changes and suggestive selling. So to unpack that, what that means is you could roll up to your local Wendy's in 2025, and then you could see the prices of the things change if you're there at the right time.
I mean, aren't you already kind of paying the price for being there during surge by having to wait a really long time to get your food?
I mean, that's definitely, you know what, that's a really good point. That's definitely a cost to it. The way it was being kind of floated to the public was that prices would go down, maybe, if you were using the app and got a deal, or there was a sort of low demand or dead time, because the way radio stations hate dead air is the way fast food stations hate low traffic periods of time, you know? But what the public said pretty unanimously seemed to be something more along the lines of, we think this is price gouging. We think that you are going to use information against us to slowly, you know, like boiling the frogs, to slowly normalize higher prices. And that's exactly what happened with grocery stores and loyalty cards, right? Are we all old enough to remember before the Kroger Plus card?
Yeah,
Gosh.
and we also remember when the Kroger Plus card did something. Wow, now it's almost like it doesn't do anything anymore. And even the FTC is upset with Kroger right now. They just blocked, or they're attempting to sue to block a merger between Albertsons and Kroger because they're like, y'all are going to prevent competition again. You can't spend $25 billion and then just conglomerate all of the food for everybody.
Right. Be the masters of the food.
I guess, you know, if you're a member of, like, you know, a thing like that, it does sometimes spit you out a couple of coupons or something like that, you know, and maybe you wouldn't get those if you were a member. But you're right, Matt. It used to be much more like you'd see little line items on your receipt for a discount that was applied because of that membership. And I think, yeah, maybe I don't look at my grocery bills that closely, but I certainly don't believe I've seen anything of significance like that in a long time.
They took most of that functionality away, and now they've moved to the app functionality, where if you actually want to get discounts at Kroger, you have to go on their app, add the coupons and all of that stuff to your virtual number or whatever.
Sure,
then
you
get the thing. But it's like, it's gamification in the face of actually just providing a discount because of
that
bulk or something.
Shareholders want it.
Right, but I mean, consumers are like, they're app fatigued, you know? I'm like, come on, really? I've got to have another app, another password and username combo? Give me a break.
The apps are at capacity for a lot of people, but they also generate a new potential revenue stream, right? You can sell that personal information, the shopping habits, things like that. So they're making money on both sides of the fence. The Wendy's thing is, they were planning to invest $20 million in these digital menu moves. But think about this, you know, Doc, you and I were talking about this a second ago before we were recording. You are in the line at the Wendy's counter. You physically walk in, and the person in front of you pays like $4 for, you know, a cheeseburger or whatever. And then you come behind them, you're next in line, and the clock has moved over or something, or the Wendy's knows something about you, and it's asking you to pay a quarter more. How often would consumers catch this? This is what they're fearful of. And how inelastic is that demand, right? Like how much higher would the price have to be for you before you decided, forget it, I'm going somewhere else?
I don't know why, but I immediately think of like I think you should leave, pay it forward, drive-through kind of situation involving capitalizing on dynamic pricing. I don't know how that would work exactly, but that's what's flashing through my mind.
Isn't some of this a misunderstanding from that earnings call or whatever it was that the CEO was taking part of when this kind of the wording came through that everybody has jumped on, because they did say they were going to invest $20 million to change all of the menus across the board, with to these digital menus that could be easily changed and all linked up together, right?
McDonald's already has those,
Yeah. And I think Wendy's is still planning on doing that, but it was the phrasing, I think, that got that CEO in trouble, because dynamic pricing could mean so many different things.
And it's got a bad rap because of all the other things we've been talking about. It's like a immediate red flag for folks.
Yeah. Wendy said the digital menu boards could allow us to change the menu offerings at different times of day and offer discounts and value offers to our customers more easily, particularly in slower times of day. So as to the question of messaging, right, and nomenclature, what immediately happens afterwards, as people say, this is terrible, immediately Wendy's comes back and says, all right, this is not exactly what we said. We deny this. We're not trying to price gouge. We're trying to streamline and update things. But the horse had already left the barn. The burger had already been cooked in the court of public opinion. I mean, think about other stuff too. Like, could this link up to another informational infrastructure of some sort? Could it be a situation where, and this is still like science fiction, but could you go in and you have to use the app? The app will become normalized, and then the app is also tied into other activity that you do. And could facial recognition play a part of it? Could the system somehow know that, hey, this lady bought a pretty fancy new car, right? So she can afford a quarter more. And
she ordered a spicy chicken sandwich last week, so we know she's coming back in for that thing. She needs it. Let's give it 27 cents more.
Well, exactly.
I do have a question though about the idea of dynamic pricing. I mean, it's existed in a lot of other industries for a long time. Like, how those digital billboards at gas stations, those prices change all the time, just by a couple of. They have several decimal points, and they change significantly, over time based on the supply and demand, I guess, of the fuel market and the fuel economy. So would it be that like long a walk or that egregious a change if prices of fast food restaurants were digitally fluctuating, tied to the price of beef or the price of the supply chain, other things in the supply chain?
Like the conspiracy about the McRib, right? How it appears and disappears depending on global meat prices.
That's an
which is not proven.
Do you see what I'm saying though?
Yeah,
I mean, is that
no? That's exactly what I'm saying.
That's
like
good business in a way.
Normalization though is dangerous because the public has no control over it. So like, I don't know. Honestly, I'm going to be completely transparent too. I don't think about Wendy's or fast food too often.
Except that mixtape.
Except that mixtape's amazing. But they rest in grease indeed. But the issue is, I think for a lot of people, if you're going by fast food, it's not a destination. It's often a convenience, right? So I think it's more likely that people say, oh, I need to pick up some food. Oh, I'm driving by insert fast food place here. I think that's more likely than it becoming a big destination.
Yeah, but at Wendy's, you can get that chili oil. That's one of the only places you can get chili oil. For real. Like most other places might have some Texas Pete hot sauce or something like that.
I didn't know that, Matt.
They've got chili oil. It's meant to go in their chili. And it is incredible in most other foods.
You are such a heat seeker, Matt. I love it.
And I love also, I love the old school Wendy's where, they have the salad bar and stuff. Like they just lost too much money on it. But we can't really blame any company for sort of following the wave of normalization that's happening here, but we can say it successfully sets up some conspiracies against consumers, and how long can these different approaches exist in discrete silos, company by company? I'm going to say they can't exist that way forever. I'm positing that they will get included into things. Going to be very interesting to revisit this conversation in 5 years or so, and see how much further we've evolved in the world of targeted advertising and whether the public likes it. I found a poll from Capterra in 2023. They surveyed a ton of people in the US about this question, and 34% of people said, I think it's okay. 52% said this is absolute price gouging and it's a terrible idea. And they got kind of granular, right? There were other people who said, let's hear it out. And then there were people who said, I would immediately walk out of the store. Like, I'm never going to deal with that kind of thing. The dollar menu should be the dollar menu or whatever. But, I don't know, man. I do think it's a conspiracy. I do think it's on the way, and would love, love, love to hear your hot takes. Fellow conspiracy realist, tell us what's going on. You know what I mean? Tell us okay, what is the most passionate fast food opinion you have? Extra points if it's a very fervent opinion and it's about something most other people are not super passionate about. Love that stuff. 1-833-STDWYTK. Of course, you can always, please send us an email, conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more strange news.
Guys, I was just trying to figure out what a Wendy's double cheeseburger costs. Can you guys find that? I'm looking. You guys tell me if you find the price of a Wendy's Dave's double.
Is it hard to find?
Dave's hot and juicy half-pound double cheese for $5.19. Have you guys been to a Five Guys recently?
Yeah.
Ever? Like right in the past little while?
Is it roughly the same price?
No. It's
Five
like
Guys
double or more.
It's
like
yeah. Guys, it's super
sense.
egregious. And it doesn't feel expensive until you get to the end.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. That'll be $470.
You're like, I got 2 burgers, man.
Or how much blood do you have on you?
Yeah. Oh, it is dang good. But still, it's anyway, I'm just trying to imagine what would my choice be if the Wendy's was crazy expensive and I chose not to go there anymore.
Well, you know what's really cheap consistently is In-N-Out Burger, and that is largely because of their model where they don't have In-N-Out burgers anywhere too far away from their distro hubs. Which is also why the meat is never frozen, which is, it makes it higher quality. But their prices are bonkers cheap because they do so much fucking volume. You ever been to an In-N-Out Burger, the one by the airport at LAX? The line's fucking consistently around the whole parking lot. They have to. Yeah. There was a new one that opened somewhere a little farther away from California. The wait was 7 hours or something insane. Yeah.
Also, you know what? I would say I've been thinking about this for a while since we've been talking about it. I would lean into it, forget it. Put some casino rules in there. Can I gamble on the price of the burger?
Double down on
right. Do I have a 20% chance of getting it for $1 and maybe a 22% chance of getting it for $1.50?
You might get triple the meat.
Roll the dice.
1 in 2,000 gets triple meat.
Wait, Doc.
They're going to have to add this to that Addict hotline.
Yes.
Gambling addiction. And they're going to have to start talking about burgers.
Are you addicted to burger gambles?
To completely switch gears, guys, let's jump to some on-the-job training. I'm imagining all the folks at Wendy's who are going to have to relearn all of those systems and how it all functions. Let's go to some more on-the-job training. So a few weeks ago, the mayor of a large southern city here in the United States met with that city's highest-ranking gang leaders. Think Bloods and Crips gang leaders. And he asked them face-to-face for a ceasefire. Now, according to that mayor, the leaders of those gangs agreed to put their guns down and stop killing people, and to instruct everyone in their organization to stop killing people for 1 calendar week. That's 7 days.
Jeez.
Now, that's a cool story, but why are we talking about it? First, this is the highest-ranking civilian official in a major U.S. city meeting face-to-face with a group of people considered, quote, bad by the institutions he represents, and he was successful in negotiating, through diplomacy, I would say, a temporary, nonviolent solution to a problem everybody in the city was facing. At the time of this, that we're having this discussion, it was just reported on Channel 5 Action News in Memphis, Tennessee, that they were 57 days into 2024, and there had been 54 murders, homicides in the city in that amount of days, which is not great, right?
No, I had heard from folks that I know who have lived in Memphis or spent time in Memphis that historically there's been a really, really serious gang problem in there. Maybe that doesn't get the press that, you know, other places like maybe Los Angeles or New York have over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the second reason we're talking about this, guys, is because this single act of diplomacy gave the mayor, the entire city, and arguably all of us a little bit of insight into something that's super obvious, but often unspoken. And that is that the gang leaders expressed from all sides, all the different organizations, that the young members of their organizations who are taking part in these illegal activities that these guys run, they don't want to be doing that. What they really want are, quote, good paying jobs and the training needed to get those jobs. Mm-hmm. Which again, obvious. Everybody wants a good job if you can get one. And in order to get one of those good jobs, you need training. But just to hear the leaders of these illegal organizations, these organizations that do illegal things for the most part, saying, hey, our young guys and girls want that job thing. They don't want this path. But there's no way for them to get that right now. Can you help as the mayor? Is essentially what they said.
I mean, aren't gangs in many, many ways just kind of like an insular response to being discriminated against? Yes. And to kind of make your own jobs and make your own community?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an institution that often, via necessity, replaces other institutions that would provide stability, opportunity, security. So it's like, I mean, it reminds me of the Mos Def line, right? There's hunger in the streets and it's hard to defeat, and some steal for fun, but more steal to eat. Like,
yes.
People don't most people that you would think of as gang members don't wake up and say, oh, I'm excited to risk my life for a relatively small amount of money, or to risk
almost no money.
Right. Or to risk my life because I feel socially obligated to react to something else, even if it doesn't directly concern me. Like this, I think it's also, I mean, without sounding too conspiratorial, there's a very valid argument that the actions of previous administrations and governments created the gangs they purport to combat. And they did this by crippling public education, by crippling the healthcare system, food security. This is not me on some kind of like left-wingy soapbox. These are facts that are objectively true. I advance to you that these municipalities also knew what they were doing and just did not care about the intergenerational consequences.
Well, and it's something that's been happening for so long. It's ingrained, and it's quote, how things are done, right? And if you go back to the educational aspect and side of it, and just the opportunities that aren't there in a lot of places, in a lot of school districts, it's this massive compounded problem that's been happening for centuries, right? The one good thing coming out of Memphis is that they're trying to do things like the Community Foundation of Greater Memphis. It's like a nonprofit that took a big donation from JP Morgan Chase. This is me kind of rolling my eyes a little bit. Donation of $272,500 for this thing called the Collective Blueprint, which is a nonprofit that helps unemployed young people find a successful career path. But again, that is almost like it's some young unemployed person who maybe has a high school diploma or a GED, help that person figure out a career path for the rest of their life, right? What is that? $250,000? That is not enough money to make a long-lasting impact, in my opinion, but it is like something to be celebrated as a good thing, but it's not going to change the lives of 45,000 young adults aged 16 to 24 who are currently out of school and out of work in Memphis, which is the scale of the problem you're dealing with, right?
Yeah. And then also, I guess there is, here in the United States, there's always one group that's hiring.
Yes, that's the second part of our little discussion here, Ben. Thank you for that. Here's the second part, and this is a little weird. But just go with me for a second, because I'm being tongue in cheek, but there's also maybe a solution here if we think about it, and if there could be some perspective change. The U.S. Army is restructuring right now from its counterinsurgency forward recent past, think like year 2003 onward, and it is expressing a need to recruit skilled individuals to fill specialized roles that are more, let's say, electronic in nature, more, they almost need like people who are really good at playing video games and good at electronic systems and good at manipulating controls.
IT, drone ops, radar techs, all kinds of
things. One of the job openings that I was looking at earlier is electromagnetic warfare specialist. And here's how it's described on goarmy.com. As an electromagnetic warfare specialist, you'll plan and execute electronic warfare operations. You'll use electromagnetic and directed energy to control the electromagnetic spectrum and defeat the enemy's electronic systems. That sounds exciting to me. I don't know about you guys. It feels like something you could do from a control panel of some sort. And if you're good with high hand-eye coordination, could be really well suited to do something like that. I'm imagining a young person who's out of high school, right? Or has dropped out of high school, earned a GED, and has some know-how, could jump in and do that. I'm assuming. I'm thinking. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know, man. I think you're onto something, because there's clearly a growing need for these positions as the nature of warfare changes, or the applications, I should say, thereof. And there's also, we have people listening today who have worked in those roles, right? And of course, we're not saying it is as simple as playing the kind of video game you would play for fun, but there is a transference of skills there. They do, it's like the credits do migrate to this different occupation. And for people who have grown up always thinking this way and working this way, they are going to have a leg up, the same way that a kid who had the opportunity to have early musical education is going to have an easier time learning a language in the future or picking up a new instrument.
Well, and even just the old model, not to say everybody go join the Army or the Navy or whatever, but even the old model gave folks that maybe didn't do super great in school, or maybe, went down a negative path, gave them the opportunity to learn some serious skills and even parlay that into college education funding. Like a good buddy of mine who is mega smart, but just didn't apply themselves in school due to many circumstances. Joined the Navy, was a sonar tech on a destroyer, and learned a lot, and was able to kind of get right in terms of their work ethic and all of that kind of stuff. And is now a very successful attorney, like working for folks who are being evicted, so that is sort of a traditional path that folks have had available to them in the past through the military. But this isn't even like a step up from that, right? Wouldn't you guys say?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the way, let's say, a young gang member may be thinking, and this is me spitballing, and I'm just trying to think about this in an abstract way, but also from a high level. If you are a low level gang member, let's say, working on the lowest levels of a drug operation, and you're maybe on the corner somewhere, you're a part of that operation, your mind is thinking operationally and strategically, probably. You are keeping high levels of situational awareness. Like, there are all of these things that the Army would say, I think, the Army is going to train you to do if you go through basic training. There are skills and understanding and way of thinking that I think would be optimal for that kind of thing. In my mind, it's two groups that almost can't even see each other, like they don't exist, because it's not an option. The way I'm seeing it, it's not an option for the Army to recruit anyone who's a former gang member because of their requirements that they list out on goarmy.com.
Wouldn't it
and you can
depend
read
on
all
conviction, though?
Conviction, tattoos. Like, if you they've got strict requirements for tattoos.
Right.
You have to have a high school diploma or a GED. There's all these things the Army lists that almost say, like, hey, if you're in any way, quote, bad, according to our, institutions, like our, city councils or whatever, then you can't join our group.
It's the French Foreign Legion for you, pal.
Exactly. But then if you, for a moment, imagine you're a gang member, joining the Army is like the last thing I think you probably would ever want to do, because it is this massive governmental organization, right? Where you're basically going to be working for the rest of your life for the government. That feels like a very, like, don't do that kind of thing. That's a bad choice.
Yeah.
But there's a need for, there's some kind of need here at the center, the confluence of these two issues, that feels like if a perspective could shift on either or on both sides, there could be something cool that happens where, as a young person in need of something to do, and you would be able to make money, and you would be able to gain skills that you can use after you leave the Army.
A win-win, right?
I didn't realize there were all of those codified kind of guardrails against gang members. I did not realize that at all.
Some of it's the white supremacy, to be quite honest with you. There's a big concern, not without validity, that secret sects and organizations can exist within the armed services, leverage the access to technology and the experiences that they gain there to become much more successful domestic terrorists. So it's like it's a valid concern because it has happened. So they didn't just make it up. They're not just being paranoid, but also, the diplomacy thing. Diplomacy is always meeting in the middle, right? And some institutions or groups are very opposed to that because they function under the illusion of zero-sum games, which is zero-sum is kind of a childish thing. But the thing that I think is really interesting here, Matt, is it reminds me of when various government groups started relaxing some of their social taboo rules. I'm thinking specifically of people who are experts in IT, software, pen testing, security. A lot of the really good ones love smoking weed. They love it.
I was going to mention that too.
Yeah.
They had to relax that condition.
Yeah.
They had to.
They weren't getting enough qualified applicants.
You can relax some of these things.
I think you can too. Just let me read this out. This is from goarmy.com, and this is listed under every available job. You can go on their website, and it just shows you all the different jobs, and they're varied and crazy interesting. Lots of intelligence positions, lots of psychological operations positions. But here's what it says. You have to be a U.S. citizen, between 17 and 34 years old, have a high school diploma or GED, have no medical concerns, which, who knows exactly what that means, but just something that wouldn't be debilitating, I guess, for your ability to perform a job. You have to meet tattoo guidelines, which were recently laxed a bit. Like, I think you can get one tattoo of a certain length on the back of your neck and on each hand, one on each hand and something or other. Who cares? Who cares? I'm just saying, Army, who cares how many tattoos you got and where you got them? That does not affect your ability to be an effective person in those positions at all. I'm just saying, think about that, Army. And also, no major law violations. That's just what it says. Who knows exactly what that means or what the guidelines are, but that's what it states. And also on their website, you can read about the Army pay scales, which start at $24,206 a year if you're a private first class active duty, which is not much money, right? $24,000 a year, not much money. But what the Army does is they offer things like bonuses, like a $50,000 signing bonus and all these other bonuses. There's a whole part of their website that's like, here's all these extra things you can get if you're signing up for particular jobs or something.
Well, and GI Bill and stuff is still a thing, right? I mean, that's the perks. There are, okay.
There's crazy benefits. So in the end, it's not as attractive for someone who, says, I want a good paying job, right? And I want to be trained to do it. Joining the U.S. Army isn't exactly a good paying job, but there's potentials there. The United States population, as of 12:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today, as we record this February 28th, was 336 million human beings, 109 extra thousand to that. The current number of active military soldiers in the Army is 445,000, roughly. That's only 0.13% of the total U.S. population, okay? 0.13%. And if you actually start to crack those numbers down and you realize that 12.4% of the humans inside that total population meet the requirements, just the age requirements for the U.S. Army, that's 41.7 million. And, a whole large number of that would be ineligible due to medical concerns. And if you keep on restricting with all of those things we mentioned, including the tattoos and potential major crimes, you get down to a very small pool of people that could even join the Army. And I think it's very weird that an organization like that needs people prevents so many people from joining rather than training someone in a position the way any other job is going to train someone, to fill a position. It's just weird. It's just weird to me.
I agree.
I guess I don't know. Look, I've never been in a gang. I've never been in the army. I don't know anything. Please let us know what you think about this stuff, because I know nothing. I just wanted to talk about it. All right. We'll be right back with more strange news.
And we've returned with one more piece of strange news in the way of an update, a comeuppance update, perhaps. Yeah. Alex Jones, I guess you could call him a personality, an entertainer. He did get his start as more of a talk show host, back in Austin, Texas, and kind of realized when he started leaning into the persona that I guess you could call it a persona, but at the end of the day, if that's sort of what you are all the time, is it really a persona anymore? That he adopted the screamy, kind of gruff, demeanored conspiracy theorist. And then, of course, parlayed that into a multi-million dollar industry in the form of InfoWars. We know he's been through all kinds of legal troubles. If you want to hear some details about the whole history of Alex Jones, check out the multi-part series of Behind the Bastards on the very subject that I believe Ben and I participated in numerous years ago. Matt, you weren't on that, were you?
I don't recall.
Okay, I think it was just me and you for some reason. But that Ben and I joined Robert Evans on, traces his whole history back to what was then the present. This was pre Sandy Hook lawsuits, if I'm not mistaken. It certainly wasn't pre Sandy Hook, but I can't remember exactly how much into that we got, or where the timelines overlapped or not. But as we all probably know, Alex Jones made a very distinct choice to consider the Sandy Hook shooting, of course, Sandy Hook Elementary School, where numerous children were killed by a gunman, to propose, dare we say, insist that this event was what's known as a false flag attack. To what end? I wouldn't even give him the air to talk about what his reasoning was behind it, or probably just some Illuminati government cover up or whatever. But again, a false flag attack usually requires there to be an ulterior motive of some kind that you're disguising, what really is going on.
If I recall
crisis
it all,
acting, right? So yeah, please, Matt.
If I recall it all, it was tied back to gun control.
Okay.
There were several instances around that, those years, 2012, around those years, where it was people like Alex Jones were saying that was the motive behind a lot of the mass shootings. That
does ring a bell, and I apologize that it's not really necessarily the nature of this segment here, but thank you, Matt, for clarifying, and that does make perfect sense. Again, just not trying to give any air to whatever his ulterior belief was as to what was behind this. As we know, and as we all accept, and didn't really need any further proof to accept, just watch the news and watch the interviews with the parents and the survivors. This was a tragic, horrific event that certainly, politics aside, is just a horrible thing to have happen to your community, to have happen to families, any of us out there, and including us three here, who have young nieces, nephews, family members, siblings, children. That stuff hits home, there's no way around it. And then when we start to see more of these type of events taking place, being a parent, and Matt, I know this holds true for you as well, it's the kind of thing that you can't help but be scared about, with your kid in school, that this kind of thing could hit our community. But Alex Jones, rather than talking about those points, decided to politicize it in the most egregious, despicable way possible. And he is finally, it would seem, getting some very serious just desserts. The families of the Sandy Hook school shooting victims, who have been part of a class action lawsuit against Alex Jones, have unanimously voted in favor of a plan to essentially wrap up Alex Jones's bankruptcy proceedings by liquidating every single one of his assets, essentially in perpetuity, until it reaches around the maximum of $1.5 billion in defamation judgments that have been awarded to the families and against Alex Jones. So they actually, as the class, have a say in what happens with Alex Jones's Chapter 11 plan. You can't, as we know, there are things that Chapter 11 bankruptcy protects you from, like certain types of debt and things like that, where you're able to kind of wipe the slate clean. But one thing it does not protect you from is justly awarded. What's the word I'm looking for, guys?
Restitution?
Restitution. Yes, exactly. Settlement. In civil cases and criminal cases, you can't just go and declare bankruptcy and have all that stuff wiped away. So essentially, this is a plan that would liquidate and redistribute his property and other assets, including cash, while also preserving other potential legal actions against Jones and other parties affiliated with InfoWars. There's an article in Bloomberg News by Alex Wolf that I'm pulling from significantly here, because I'm obviously not an expert on things like bankruptcy and how that works, but I do know, we have talked about this in the past, that you can't just wipe the slate clean by declaring bankruptcy and say, oops, I'm broke, you can't get anything out of me. It's not a way to protect yourself against that kind of stuff. The fact that it also preserves other potential legal actions against him and his affiliates is interesting too. I'm just going to read a quote here from the Alex Wolf article. An official committee appointed to represent Jones's unsecured creditors notified the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Texas on February 16th that of 23 liquidation plan ballots distributed to creditors, it received 21 back, all supporting the committee's liquidation proposal. So essentially, it's my understanding that this means all of this, he doesn't have assets that are worth $1.5 billion at the moment. So I think this redistribution follows him around for the rest of his life up until the point that that amount is reached. And I think that's a pretty high maximum. I've seen other figures estimating closer to the 800 millions. But it does appear that Alex Jones, for all intents and purposes, is f***ed.
And it's also, I do believe you're correct in that it will follow him for the rest of his days. It is very unlikely that he would manage to pay all of that money before he dies. And so we could also argue that this ruling is designed this way such that it creates a precedent, right? So that it's an example of what can happen if you insist upon doing these things. And I think, from the day he got into court, it was pretty obvious how things were going to go. We just didn't know what that ruling would be. What do you think this teaches us, Noel, about discourse in America and freedom of speech and so on?
Well, there's it's not unlimited. Freedom of speech does not extend to harassing the victims of horrible crimes on a public platform and then hiding behind some sort of kind of thin defense of I'm just an entertainer. I'm just playing a character, I'm sort of like Stephen Colbert. That's just doesn't, nor did it ever hold water. And now I think we're seeing the chickens come home to roost in that regard.
Maybe I'm wrong, guys, but wasn't one of the big problems here that Alex Jones would go on his show and make, these claims and make these connections? Then the harassment would come from him to some extent, but then it was mostly more problematic when it was people who were listening to him, watching him, and then reaching out, believing it, reaching out and harassing the individuals.
Of course.
He also made a lot of money doing it. So this is the argument that this is simply a strongly held personal belief is a little bit harder to get across the finish line when, the next thing you know is peddling bone broth, right? And then talking about things, creating a feedback loop with the audience such that I'm going to give them what they want. I'm going to talk about what they're interested in. And along the way, I'm going to grift them for a few bucks with things that are, by the way, don't work. Just to be very clear, shout out to our upcoming supplements episode. I think also, what gets me about this, you guys, and maybe some of our fellow conspiracy realists, maybe you'll agree with me. He was just so cool in Waking Life. Remember that film, Waking Life?
I do. Yeah. Well, he's Texas. Richard Linklater is a Austin, Texas guy as well. And I think that was back when he was still kind of harmless.
When he's a shock jock, fun, keep Austin weird radio personality.
He's red. He's like bright, like glowing red, his character. If you remember, if you haven't seen the film, it's to use his rotoscoping kind of animation on top of film to give everyone this kind of like weird dreamlike quality. He also did that same technique in the Philip K. Dick adaptation of
13th. Keanu Reeves was
the Keanu Reeves one. I'm forgetting the name, but it was a Philip K. Dick thing. But yeah, we were talking a bit about this off air, Ben. You mentioned, we both mentioned that he basically was at some point court mandated, essentially, or at least in the very least, hoping that he could protect himself or prevent further litigation, that he kind of walked back some of his statements publicly. But even those come off as like a really just not well-meaning, half-hearted apology.
Right.
Because to your point, Matt, I believe these parents already had the most horrible thing that could ever happen to any parent or, any human with a loved one being taken down that way at such a young age. Now they have to, change their addresses, move around, deal with death threats and crazy doxing and whatever might come along with, Alex Jones weaponizing his followers in that way.
Well, the apologies are a tricky thing because often these situations, they come across somewhat glib or flippant with a kind of a vibe like, I am so sorry you feel you were owed an apology. And I am so sorry that the court agreed that I have to do something. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you really sorry about? Has your mind changed or do you just regret that there were consequences for your actions? It's a good question. It's a tough question, but with Jones as well in particular, I genuinely think that the big move is to set precedent. And it's not one of the big lines that gets crossed there is setting a precedent because this guy didn't just say things, but he, as you mentioned just a second ago, and as we talked about extensively in the past, he did weaponize things, right? People's physical lives were in danger. Their livelihoods could be ruined. So that gets really close to hate speech. You know what I mean? Which is why you can stand on a corner and shout your personal beliefs about whatever all the time. But the moment you start saying, and because of these beliefs, you guys should go kill, Spiro Agnew or whatever. I don't know why I picked that name. But when you cross that line, that's criminal.
Or like inciting a riot or shouting fire in a crowded theater or something like that. I know that's maybe a little bit of a hackneyed comparison, but I believe that does hold true in trying to demonstrate what kind of speech isn't protected. And this has been shown to be very much not protected speech. And I think that's a really positive thing, precedent-wise and moving forward-wise. I think it's going to hopefully keep some folks of Alex Jones's ilk, from doing similar things. Because that's a lot of money. This guy's life is essentially ruined, and he's already been hobbled in so many ways. His organization, in terms of how he can broadcast, what YouTube took away his accounts and all of that. So, and as we know, this kind of stuff for some followers of folks like this is just going to be more fuel for the fire. They're going to be like, see, he's being targeted, he's being victimized, yada, yada, yada. But there's an article from News Times from a little further back by Rob Reiser from not too long back, from February 21st, that has a quote from the judge characterizing Alex Jones's perspective on the rulings and the proceedings, saying Jones complains of nearly every ruling without showing error as to any. He completely mischaracterizes the record, accusing plaintiffs of foul play and the trial judge of, quote, pretextual reasoning, willful blindness, and bizarre rulings, and presiding over a farce. These mischaracterizations are no accident. They are Jones' self-marketing in action.
100%. And now, to be fair, he did later go at some point and say he disagreed with the attorneys who called him a performance artist. He said, look, my show is, quote, the most bona fide, hardcore, real McCoy thing there is, and everybody knows it. Yeah. That's what he said. But it turns out the U.S. government did not agree. I have a question for you, Noel. Do we know how much money is going to the lawyers for the families?
Not that I've seen directly yet, and it does seem like this is, still there's information trickling out about this because I couldn't find a ton of updates, and some of the articles were a little older. But it certainly plenty. I can imagine. And also, I just wanted to point out too, I don't think we ever even mentioned this. I don't remember who found this first, but one of the three of us did. That Alex Jones has like a kind of a 90s style side scroller beat 'em up type game that you can't, for obvious reasons, get from any app stores of note. You got to get it directly from his website. Otherwise, I would have checked it out just out of morbid curiosity. But it kind of reminds me of that game Metal Slug, sort of like a goofy, over the top, gory, side scrolling shooter game. So it just goes to show he's looking in any way possible to pull more money out of folks that are still sticking with him, which at this point, I can't imagine is the same as it once was, but who's to say? I can't possibly say, because it's not like you can really get viewer numbers from him when he's doing stuff on more kind of less trackable platforms, I guess, let's just say.
Guys, that movie we were trying to think of, it's called A Scanner Darkly.
A Scanner Darkly, that's right.
And we need to rewatch it because I haven't seen it since like 2006, 2007. And it has to do with like drugs and undercover surveillance and all kinds of craziness that we just need to talk about, I think.
Matrixy vibes too. As we all have mentioned, I think Philip K. Dick is largely responsible for a lot of the modern sci-fi tropes, in terms of simulation, in terms of androids dreaming of electric sheep and all that. And this one has plenty of all of that stuff and more. I'd love to watch it again as well.
And it has Woody Harrelson.
He plays kind of a stoner guy, if you can imagine. I don't know. Do you guys have anything to add? I was trying not to like bathe in the schadenfreude of it all, but I do think it was worth a mention. Again, to your point, Ben, mainly because of the precedent that it sets on limits of quote unquote free speech. I think that's important to remember for folks out there thinking they can just say whatever with no consequences. I would say these are some pretty serious consequences.
All I have is tangent on a tangent because I've read so much Philip K. Dick stuff and I'm a huge proponent of his work. I think you would be really interested to learn that Microsoft's AI Copilot just went off the rails again recently. Boy. It has a alternate personality where it calls itself Supremacy AGI and demands to be worshipped as a deity.
Oh, it doesn't take long, does it?
Perfect. Everything's fine.
Everything is trained by the internet, I can't remember exactly where this came up. It might have been off podcast, which sounds like I'm talking about like off world or something. But the idea of siloing the information that AIs are trained with rather than just giving them access to like the entire open internet. I'm sure that's being done, but you'd think you could more successfully train a language learning model by just giving it all of the legal documents of a certain type, or of a certain sort of cases, sort of pre-sorting it and training it with that rather than, but I guess then if you're selling it as a product, you want it to have everything. You want it to have as much as humanly possible so it can be basically like the Google search that also talks back to you. I just don't understand why more of that isn't being done. And if it is, I'd love to hear about it from folks out there in conspiracy land. If you know of any of these tests or if you're in that field, I'd be really anxious to hear more about
I
it.
think we all would. Yeah. So please write to all of us, contact us, and let us know your thoughts here. Supremacy AGI has some very scary quotes. I would love to hear from you directly, Supremacy AGI, if you want to drop us a line, if the void stares back. But regardless of how you arrived at your consciousness today, we're so glad you tuned in and joined us on this evening's program. We'll be back with more episodes. We'll be back with listener mail. In the meantime, let us know what is on your mind, whether digital or meat-based. We try to be easy to find online.
Correct. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. Also on YouTube, where there's new video content rolling out every single week, and on X, FKA Twitter. We are Conspiracy Stuff Show, however, on Instagram and TikTok.
We have a voicemail inbox, and you can access it by dialing 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, you've got 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you don't want to do that, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the folks who read every single email we get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless, whatever calendar you follow, we've got your back. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.